Welcome into another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today I have my 5 takeaway series. I'll be dropping this every Monday until the end of the NFL season, covering that week's slate. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go. First one. So Ladd McConkey is the Chargers' alpha wide receiver. Chargers squeaked out a 17-13 win over the Falcons, but honestly, it was more because of Kirk Cousins' struggles than anything the Chargers offense did well. Chargers only had 46 offensive snaps, including the kneel downs, to end the game, which is not a lot. Justin Herbert, 16 of 23 for 147 yards. Not a lot of yardage there. The committee of Gus Edwards, Kimani Vidal, and Hassan Haskins didn't do anything. But Herbert didn't pick up the slack in this particular game. Now, McConkey had 9 catches, 117 yards on 12 targets, 50% target share. No other receiver had more than 4 targets or 12 yards. McConkey was the entire receiving offense, led the team in routes run, despite his injury, which I don't think was too severe because he was doing a post-game interview after the game. So I'm not worried about McConkey's injury, but even with that, he still dominated. No one else did anything. Zero. It's very clear. Quentin Johnston maybe could be a backup outside wide receiver, but that's what he is. He's nothing more. Joshua Palmer maybe could do that for another team, be their wide receiver 3. And Will Disley was a nice story for a few weeks, but Will Disley vanished completely from this game. They're not meant to be featured in the passing game. McConkey is featured, and McConkey will remain really good even if the Chargers add someone in free agency or high in the NFL draft. I can tell you that. It's too good to go away. Now, what would we do? Well, I would buy Justin Herbert. Now, Herbert did struggle in this game, but since the week 5 bye, Herbert had been excellent before this game. So before this one, 62.2% completion, 9 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns, no picks, 260.9 passing yards a game, and 31 carries, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he's running the ball a little bit. And these numbers are despite lacking any reliable receiving weapons beyond McConkey. What's going to happen when the Chargers add a real outside wide receiver in the offseason? So could you buy Justin Herbert for 225 first? Maybe. Could you buy Justin Herbert for Kyler Murray? Now, Kyler Murray might score more for fantasy sometimes, but Justin Herbert is a way better real-life quarterback. I'm not sure that Kyler Murray is the dynasty asset that we want him to be. I would rather just have Justin Herbert, especially if you're playing in a 6-point passing touchdown league. Now, my second takeaway, Tank Dell vanished again. The Texans won their game barely somehow against the Jaguars, 23-20. A lot went wrong for the Texans, but they still managed to win. CJ Stroud was just okay. 22 of 34 for 242 yards and a touchdown. He played a fine game, but you would think with 34 passing attempts, 22 completions is not awful, and 242 yards, that should be enough for Dell to deliver something. And he did not. 1 catch for 23 yards and 4 targets. It was not a routes run issue. He ran more routes than Nico Collins. He just didn't do anything. And I know what you're going to say. Yes, we've all seen on Twitter that one play where, yes, Dell was wide open and the ball didn't quite get there. But a lot of receivers have what-if plays. And somehow this year, none of the what-if plays have gone down for Tank Dell. I mean, sometimes he's dropped the ball. Sometimes he's been in the wrong place. And then there have been plays where CJ Stroud has not executed. But that hasn't seemed to stop Nico Collins from being elite. So we can't just blame it all on CJ Stroud. Dalton Schultz and Joe Mixon had more targets than Tank Dell in this game. John Mechie had more catches. The part of this is a Dell problem. It is not all the offense. Now, this year, Dell has 43 catches, 543 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 72 targets, 3.6 catches and 45.3 yards a game. He had 4.3 catches and 64.5 yards a game in 2023. So Dell's been significantly worse than his rookie year. And he still hasn't managed to produce, despite, we said, well, Stephon Diggs might stop Tank Dell from producing. Diggs is out for the year. Dell still hasn't produced. Nico Collins could stop Dell from producing. Well, Nico Collins missed 5 games. Dell has still not produced. I think dynasty managers just assumed that maybe Dell would even compete with Nico Collins for wide receiver 1. But even if not, he would be the clear wide receiver 1, or wide receiver 2 behind Nico Collins after Stephon Diggs maybe left after this year. It was a 1-year signing. But now I think we're in a different stage. I think we have to ask, can Dell even be the number 2 option on this team? Can he even be a consistent wide receiver 2? Is he good enough to be the secondary receiving option on this team or not? I'm not sure about that. Now, kind of going to be a broken record, but I would buy CJ Stroud off of this game. I think there's not much to do with Dell. I think it is what it is. I think it's too late to sell, and haven't, buying except at a massive discount I'm not so interested in. But I will say, CJ Stroud is a good buy target. I'm sure you're going to hear me talk about this during the offseason. I mean, his touchdown numbers are so low for the passing yardage and yards per attempt that he has. So it's not going to continue. CJ Stroud has not been bad. He just is on the wrong side, and the very severe wrong side, of touchdown regression. And we know that that's random. Could you get CJ Stroud for Baker Mayfield in 25-second? I would absolutely do that. I like Baker Mayfield, but this is CJ Stroud easily in Dynasty. And then this one, I love Joe Burrow. I just want to get this straight. I love Joe Burrow. Is Joe Burrow worth a first more than CJ Stroud in Superflex? No, he's not. So I would take the 26 first with CJ Stroud and capitalize on the higher value of Joe Burrow, especially if you're not competing. This is a great time heading into a bye. People are desperate to buy CJ Stroud. My next takeaway, Russell Wilson cemented a 2025 starting job. And I'll say this was one of his best games in a long time. 29 of 38 for 414 yards, 3 touchdowns, interception, 10.9 yards per attempt. He was excellent. I do not think the Steelers would have won this game with Justin Fields at quarterback. Wilson is now 5-1 as the starting quarterback. And you can say, well, quarterback wins, that's not everything. But he's looked really good. I mean, in this game, he was really good. He looked like a difference-making quarterback. Maybe the problems were just it wasn't working in Denver. So I don't think we're talking now about if Russell Wilson will be a starter in 25. It's not if, it's where, which I think isn't being talked about enough. Everyone is assuming Russell Wilson will go back to the Steelers, and I do think that's the most likely outcome. But we have to remember, he's a free agent. Technically, he could go anywhere. Wilson and Sam Darnold, to me, are the 2 quarterbacks who are legitimate, not bridge, not 4 games, legitimate free agent starters available. And I do think he'll be back with the Steelers, but it's something to watch because we know free agency is a wild thing. It's never a guarantee, but you should be valuing Russell Wilson as if he's a starter for the rest of this year and next year, who you can play as a quarterback 2 in your Dynasty Superflex leagues. And those players are often undervalued. Now, what do? I feel like I say this all the time, but I just don't believe in George Pickens at the level where he's valued at all. At all, I don't believe it. Yes, he delivered for fantasy, 74 yards and a touchdown. It was just 6 targets on 38 attempts. That's not that good. 3 catches on 29 completions is not that good either. The volume's not there. It's there sometimes. We see that there are so many issues with George Pickens. There's a temper tantrum every other week. I cannot help but feel that the Steelers are using Pickens as their wide receiver 1 because they have to, not because they want to. We know they wanted to trade for Brandon Ayuk. I just don't buy it. I feel like George Pickens is overvalued, and I think in the offseason, we're going to see some other receivers brought in here, and things are going to change. Now, you can tell George Pickens for DK Metcalf. I would rather have DK Metcalf. I trust DK Metcalf. We know that DK Metcalf is maybe a tick below elite wide receiver. I don't believe that George Pickens is the same kind of talent as DK Metcalf, even though DK Metcalf is older. And this other one I like better. You get Rome Odunze in a 26-second for George Pickens. I would easily take that. I still believe in Rome Odunze. My belief has not been shaken. Still getting the targets. He still looks good. And he is a rookie. Played most of the year in Shane Waldron's dumpster fire. So I would easily still do this deal to acquire George Pickens. Or, sorry, acquire Rome Odunze. Sell George Pickens. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. Right now, 25% discount off your first month at all tiers. And I'm going to keep offering stuff like this. There's always a discount to sign up for yearly, 20% discount if you sign up for a yearly membership. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month and include all of that. And if you want to know more about the Patreon, check out both of my why you should join the Patreon videos on the channel there on the homepage. And as always, I want to say I really appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who join. The content is going to look different during the offseason. I think there's going to be significantly fewer public YouTube videos. I'm going to do videos that are algorithm losers, but that I still want to do for patrons only. Free agency preview, talking about rookies in February. These things are not going to work in the YouTube algorithm, but I'll still do them for the patrons. So if you want all of my content throughout the offseason, that's going to be for Patreon subscribers only. And I might bring back some free trials at some point during the offseason as well. With that said, let's move into our next topic. So, next topic, Bryce Young and Jonathon Brooks have hope. Now, Young has looked way better lately, even though the Panthers did lose this game. Wouldn't say it was his fault. 26 to 46, 298 yards, touchdown, 6.5 yards per attempt, 3 carries, 17 yards, a touchdown on the ground. Wasn't amazing, but he looked like an NFL quarterback. And I fully believe the recent report that the Panthers are planning to give Young one more shot in 2025. I don't think he's their franchise quarterback yet. I do think if he, quarterbacks get 3 years and then you have to decide in that 5th year option. If he does not deliver a winning team in 2025, I think they will move on. But I do think he's going to get a fair shot to have one more year as the starter next year. Adam Thielen delivered 8 catches, 99 yards, touchdown on 10 targets. Could have had a bigger day with that touchdown taken away on review, but he still smashed, which was nice. Xavier Legette, 4 catches, 53 yards on 8 targets. He was fine. He led the Panthers in routes run, but he didn't stand out in this game compared to Thielen, David Moore, and even Tommy Tremble got involved. So I don't know about Xavier Legette. I'm kind of on the fence with him. Jonathon Brooks, 6 carries for 18 yards and 3 catches for 23 yards. Now, that's not impressive. And he only played 15 snaps. But I will say, when he was playing, he was used. He had 6 carries and ran 6 routes on those plays. And 6 of those routes turned into 3 catches. So he was used on the snaps he had, which is what we like to see. And he may get an uptick in work because Chuba Hubbard had 12 carries for 43 yards and no targets with a critical lost fumble. 55 snaps, not the usage we wanted. Did not get passing game looks at all. I do expect Hubbard to remain the starter. He did get that contract extension, but we know that a lot of that was funny money. I do not think we'll be able to trust Chuba Hubbard in fantasy anymore. I think Chuba Hubbard is now more of a flex play because Jonathon Brooks is going to take enough work away that it's going to kill Hubbard's fantasy value. So you had opportunities to sell Hubbard. Now, unfortunately, I think it's too late. I think you're stuck with him. But for me, I'd consider looking at moving Xavier Legette. I like him. I'm not saying I don't like him, but he couldn't even stand out versus Thielen, Tremble, and David Moore, and with Jatavion Sanders out. We know that the Panthers are going to add a wide receiver that's better than Xavier Legette, right? I mean, almost certainly. They could bring in a free agent wide receiver or draft a wide receiver in round 1 or round 2. That player is almost certainly going to be better than Legette. And while Young has been improving, are we excited for Bryce Young's 2nd wide receiver or 3rd option in the offense? No, we're not excited for that at all. So Xavier Legette, I think, is someone who's going to lose some value throughout the offseason because right now he's the pseudo 1 and he's not a 1. He's not a 1 on an NFL team at all. Could you sell? I saw this one. This was interesting. Sell Xavier Legette and Jonnu Smith for Dak Prescott and Superflex 10 and Premium. I'd consider that. And then this has been floated a lot in my Patreon Discord. Probably can't get a 25 first for Xavier Legette, but people are already, for some reason, down on the 26 class. It's so far away. There's nothing to be down on yet. I would take a 26 first for Xavier Legette without a second thought. Now, my final story. Christian McCaffrey, PCL injury and 49ers offensive decline. Usually I don't do injuries on here, but this I think is such a big deal that I chose to roll it all in here. Nothing has gone right for the 49ers this year. The Bills blew them out 35-10. Everything went wrong. It was so sad because McCaffrey looked good again. 7 carries for 53 yards. We saw some burst that we had not seen in the previous 3 weeks. 2 catches for 14 yards before he exited with this likely season-ending injury, it seems like. Regardless, the 49ers are not going to make the playoffs. If they somehow did, maybe McCaffrey could return for that, but his fantasy season is over. It's all in vain now, unfortunately, waiting for him to return this game. But let's look at what McCaffrey did in the 3 games he started and finished the last 3 weeks. And he played 80% or more snaps, in the 90s in some of them. 43 carries, 149 yards, 3.5 yards a carry, 13 catches, 132 yards, 14 carries, 49.7 yards, and 4.3 catches and 44 yards in the passing game per game. So we were still averaging about 93 yards a game. I mean, just a shade under 19 touches, but the volume still wasn't vintage CMC. The efficiency was not there at all, and he'd scored 0 touchdowns in those 3 games. At this point, I think it's fair to say CMC's dynasty value is not going to recover. He's going to be 29 before he plays another fantasy snap. We're not going to know what he would have done the rest of the year coming off the injury and being healthy. So he's going to be completely untrustworthy. We're not going to get back to CMC being worth a first-round pick in Dynasty ever again. We're past that. Now, Jordan Mason came in, replaced him. 13 carries for 78 yards, while Isaac Guerendo had 4 carries, 19 yards, touchdown, 1 catch for -3 yards. Mason had 25 snaps to Guerendo's 11, but Guerendo was a passing specialist, kind of. He ran a route on 7 of his 11 snaps. Moving forward, I don't think we get the old Jordan Mason. I think Mason is more of a borderline RB1, high-end RB2 in PPR leagues because he doesn't get any passing game work, 0. And Guerendo will get some passing game work, but he's not going to be playable at all. He's just more going to be a thorn in Mason's side, which is enough to push Mason, like I said, down to the borderline RB1 range. Brock Purdy was horrible. 11 of 18 for 94 yards, 2 carries, 4 yards with a loss. There was also a lost fumble in there. He should not have played in this game. It was a mistake. He was nowhere near healthy. I'm not going to count this game against his dynasty value. I'm nervous about the rest of this year, but I'm not nervous about his dynasty value. I'm not nervous about 2025 for Brock Purdy at all. He's been really good before this injury. And Purdy's struggles took out the entire receiving offense. Jauan Jennings had 3 catches, 56 yards on 5 targets. He's wide receiver 1 for the 49ers right now. Tied for the lead in targets, had 56 of the 94 receiving yards, and he ran a full route share, and he was the only wide receiver to do so. Deebo Samuel, 4 catches, 20 yards on 5 targets. Didn't even get involved as a rusher with CMC out. Most of his damage was on kick returns, although he fumbled one of those. Those don't help most dynasty managers. So I don't know. I'm nervous about Deebo Samuel. Going to be 29 in the offseason. Makes me very nervous. Now, what do? I actually am looking into buying Jauan Jennings. I think the dynasty managers will dismiss the 49ers offense, at least the receiving game, for the rest of the year. But if there's one receiving asset we can trust, it's actually Jennings, who's the only receiver to do anything in this disaster. For the year, 50 catches, 684 yards, 4 touchdowns, 70 targets, 5 catches, and 68.4 yards a game. That's actually really good. Produced consistently all year, not super expensive. Plus, he turns 28 in July 2025, so it's not like his career's over after this year. You might still get something beyond this year. I saw a trade, Jennings for a 26th third. I would absolutely do that. And you could also buy him for J.K. Dobbins or Jaylen Warren or James Conner. These are all temporary assets. And I would much rather have Jauan Jennings over any of them in Dynasty. Now, there was one piece of news that I thought was, or 2 pieces that were interesting. James Conner got a contract extension, 2 years, $19 million through 2026. Exact guarantees are unclear, but Conner certainly locked up for the 2025 season. 2026 is probably mostly non-guaranteed. Conner was still good. 17 carries, 68 yards, 3 catches, 13 yards in week 13. Played over half the snaps and led in routes run over both Amari DiMercato and Trey Benson. DiMercato actually saw more time than Benson, but there's no challenge to Conner's starting role. Trey Benson might be a buy low. Conner's going to be 30 before the 2025 season starts. Haven't completely ridden Benson off, but he'd have to come in a trade low or as a throw-in. Now, next story. Taysom Hill, ACL tear. Yeah, he tore his ACL, severed other ligament damage. Considering Hill turns 35 in August 2025, this is a career-threatening injury. It sucks because Hill was having a great year. 39 carries, 278 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 23 catches for 187 yards. Been especially involved lately after Chris Olave's injury. Had at least 2 catches in the last 5 games and was also involved as a runner, but unfortunately, this is probably it for Hill. Juwan Johnson had 5 catches, 36 yards on 7 targets. He produced with Hill out. Saints have no real wide receivers healthy, so Johnson may be viable for tight end desperate teams, but I'd easily sell him for a third if I didn't need him. Now, we'll do one quick Patreon question. Are there any particular players that stand out to you as great trade targets for rebuilding teams? So usually when I'm looking at this, a trade target for rebuilding team has to be young enough that we trust them for years. It's probably never going to be a running back. It's usually someone who's injured or underperforming. Rashee Rice, definitely on that list. He's been on that list all year. Maybe Brian Thomas with Trevor Lawrence down again with an injury. Trevor Lawrence himself, because of his massive contract, he's still young for a quarterback. Rome Odunze, maybe because he's not producing that much. And Chris Olave, the last one, again, kind of out of mind if it's really low. Now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, start sit, redraft, and more. We've got 25% discounts available at all tiers today for Black Friday. And every sign-up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.